Ray Ives, the pen of an underdog. So still going through part one here. Thank you for joining again. Thank you for listening. Again, my intentions are to share this story, the pen of an underdog, with you because there's something in here that can change your life. And I think there's some interesting stories too. So this is my journey. It comes down to the point where at a certain point, you have to stop consuming and start creating. Stop consuming and start creating. That's going to be repeated and emphasized probably in all these videos. So next, as I'm following the framework of the book, in part one, there's a subchapter called The Underdog Can Make a Salty Dog and Befriend the Alley Dog. I'm following theme here. The underdog. Salty dog is a drink and alley dogs are, dogs in the alley are homeless people. So after going through bartending school, I landed this job. It was an Italian restaurant. I was right off the Magnificent Miles. So the Magnificent Miles were like all the upscale designer and high fashion brands were on Michigan Avenue. So this was basically right off Michigan Avenue in Ohio and taught me something so valuable. So coming off of playing above the rim, that was a goal. Like there was a goal of mine. Like I really wanted it and I attained it. I was able to slam dunk. Now, the next thing, I didn't know it. At the time I was in an apprenticeship. I was learning the psychology of people. I was learning the psychology of situations. And it really helped me as a bartender because all walks of life come in. You have young people, old people, happy people, narcissists, successful people, depressed people, all walks of life. And a lot of the corporate people would come in. And I'll be quite honestly, when the corporate people came in, I was somewhat envious. It was like they sort of come in, they would come in groups and, each group kind of had their unique, or each company had their unique set of dressing principles, even within departments, right? And I was able to read people and almost like figure out, right, who were the accountants, who were the engineers, who was like C-suite, right? It was like, the engineers, like they were just kind of nerdy. They looked very scientific. The salespeople, account managers, great style, swag. Accountants were really dull and predictable. And like the C-suite and the executives, like they never ate alone. There was always a big group. And so I started looking at these people and observing, right? Simply observing. I was a bartender. I was happy with the job. And I remember all these people would come in and they had one thing in common. It was like they had this level of intelligence and accomplishment that I envied in a way, right? Or like I wanted to be a part of. They went to college. They were making money. It was safe. It was organized. My perception of that was super grandiose at the time. But they also had something. It was this work badge. Everybody had this little badge to access the corporations. You walk into the corporate office. It was a secured place. You sign your badge or you get access to different rooms. And I always looked and I was like, wow, that's like a badge of honor. Like one day, maybe, I'll be in like the career hierarchy and able to have one of those badges. But for right now, I was a 21-year-old bartender, just learning about people. It was almost like a dress rehearsal. People would come in, order drinks, order food. I'd watch how they interacted. I would watch the conversations. I'd watch how people opened up in happy hour, how they started out how they started out and like everybody was protected and professional. And, 3 hours later after the happy hour, everybody was back to being natural and human. And I always thought being in a corporation, hey, can't you just fast forward past happy hour and everybody get in the boardroom and just be like open and creative and talk and not be so judgmental or say what you want. But anyway, so I worked at this bar, this Italian restaurant. It was a great Italian restaurant, very well known. And on top, there was a Sicilian steakhouse. They were both owned by the same. I had a parking dilemma. I would drive in downtown Chicago, Magnificent Mile. Parking was impossible. One, to find a spot, and then two, to pay it, feed the meter. I just didn't have the time to do it. Or if I went and paid for parking, it would just eat into my tips that it was like a lot of it would go to parking. But I had a solution. Behind the restaurant was an alley, and there's three homeless guys. There's three homeless guys that live back there. Clarence, Biggie, and Shorty. These are their names. Like these were people that like I hung out. So these homeless men became my friends. I looked out for them. They looked out for me. How did I look out for them? Okay. People would come in, have food, order expensive dishes, eat maybe a third of it, and not want it to go. And I would pack it up, give it to the guys. Or if the kitchen made food and they're like, oh, you know what, this was a mistake, never been touched, I'd pack it up, give it to the guys. It came to the point where they were starting to become picky. It was, they wanted their steak like medium well, not rare, and all these things. But long story short, these 3 homeless guys, they became my friends. And how did they help me? Well, one, they helped me realize this, is that whether you're the CEO, you're the janitor, or you're homeless, or you're going through a transition, like, people are people. Like, when we're told to love your neighbor and love people, that means everybody. That means literally everybody. It's like giving everybody the same respect, the same dignity, regardless of what's happening. And so I'll explain these guys. Clarence, he was a mellow man. He had like silent strength. It was like intense. You never knew with Clarence. He could hit that switch and just become like a maniac, but he was calm. Then there was Big E. Big E was 6'5", and he was just like ripped. And he was the scariest because his behavior was like super sporadic. You never knew. It was super unpredictable. And when he walked towards you, he walked with this intensity. Like, he was like, he could just be like, oh, hey, what's up, Ray? But like when he's walking towards you, you're like, wow, this guy's intense. Like, he looks like he's going into like a championship fight. And then there was Shorty. And Shorty was 4'8", and he would sing and dance all the time. He'd come up to you and he'd start singing. He had this like really smooth, his voice was like the wind in a summer night. It was just smooth, right? And he was like lively and animated, and he had skills, and he would dance and sing. So my parking situation, I was trying to find parking. The post office was behind there, but on the weekends or like after hours, the post office was closed. City tow truck would always go around the block trying to hand out tickets or tow cars. Big E, Clarence, and Shorty would wave off the tow truck. You mean, what do you mean wave off? Oh, Big E would stand there and be like, this is my car. I'm just parked here right now. You know, I'm doing this or that. And for whatever reason, I would be able to leave my car there. And then after the post office was closed, there was another restaurant that used it for valet parking. So my car just became a part of that. But Big E, Clarence, and Shorty would always make sure the car was taken care of, and I took care of them. So here's the story. Fast forward, it was like a sub-zero night, Chicago blizzard, like snow and wind was coming off Lake Michigan. You know, I remember being with the staff and nobody was in the restaurant and just making, we had a cappuccino machine, and I put all this great stuff in there, coffee liqueur, amaretto, Bailey's, and make this coffee. So I'm sitting there, you know, enjoying this luxury, and the chef's called. They're like, oh, hey, somebody's here for you. I'm like, okay, you know. They're like, oh, at the back door. I'm like, somebody's here for me at the back door? What could this be? The cooks, they were kind of laughing about it. They knew I was the one that was close with the homeless people, and the cooks wouldn't even pay attention to them. They just walked by them. Whatever. So I'm there. I go to the back door. I knew it was going to be one of these guys, and it's Shorty. Right? And I'm looking at Shorty, and in his beard, he has icicles, all these clothes on. And it was a freezing cold night, and the snow was starting to accumulate. And he's sitting there, he's shaking. He's like, Ray, I'm hurting. He's like, I'm hurting. I need help. And I'm like, Shorty, I'm like, okay, what do you need? He's like, I'm freezing. He's like, if I'm out here, I'm going to die. He's like, I'm freezing. I was like, all right. So, moment in time. Risk. Put it on the line, do the right thing. I was like, all right, Shorty. Like, we've had a lot of conversations. We understand each other. Like, I knew Shorty as a good human being. And this is what I told him. Shorty, walk around on Ohio Street to the front. Stay off to the side door. Wait for me to get there. Okay? So in this restaurant, there was 3 floors. It was stacked. The second floor was a Sicilian steakhouse. The third floor was like bathrooms. And the fourth floor was like nobody was ever on. It was not open. I'm there with Shorty. Meet him by the front door. Put him upstairs, the 4th floor. It was warm in the hallway. It was like one of those things like the vent. It was like super warm right there. The vent was right there. I said, Shorty, look, I'm putting it on the line here. 2 rules. No dancing, no singing. Because the guy loved to sing and dance. Like, he would just like break out, start singing. He'd be by himself singing. He'd see people on the street. He'd sing, he'd dance. No singing, no dancing, Shorty, please. So I put him up there, and I was like, this is a very human moment, right? I could lose everything. My world could have, if I got caught doing that, I would have gotten fired, lost my income, and it just would have been bad. But like, I had to put it on the line for this man. who was a good guy. He just happened to be homeless, and I considered him a friend. So I hooked him up. I went up there. I gave him a pasta con pesce. Now, that may not mean a lot, but it was a linguine with a white sauce, clams, mussel, salmon, everything. It was loaded. It was one of my favorite dishes. I give him pasta con pesce, and I give him 3 Heinekens, and I remind him, Shorty, no singing, no dancing. Get warm, get fed, and then you have to go, basically. It was like that. That's the best I could have done for Shorty at the time. So, and that's exactly what I did. I look at the lesson here in The Pen of an Underdog, and it's like you have to give, right? Because it's all done in love. And why did I help the guy? I truly believe that we're all interconnected and that love is love. And whether we know it or not, that interconnection has an effect on us. And so I knew whether Shorty was a CEO or a homeless guy, that I was going to treat him with the same respect and dignity. And so that's the story. Wanted to share that. Lots to come. Please follow, more to talk about, and subscribe. I never thought I would say that, but subscribe. Let's keep this going. Let's stay connected. Ray Ives, The Pen of an Underdog.